Well, there we are. Jimmy Olsen has gone to tent heaven. He is no longer until we reincarnate him with a new, improved Jimmy Olsen, which we've not done yet. But we will. We took Jimmy Olsen down, tried to fix him. He couldn't be fixed. He was broken. So much for Jimmy Olsen. Another beautiful day here in the neighborhood. Oh, look at this. Last night, my wife was emptying a box, and this was in the box. You see that scorpion? It's dead, but it was in the box. Amazing. There it is, right there. That's what you get out here in the desert. You get scorpions, and when it gets a little warmer, the snakes are going to come out. Yahoo! Here we are. But it's all good. Hey, good day to you. Glad you're with me on this another wonderful day in the warm Arizona desert. I hope you're doing well. And you know what? I can say I hope you're doing well because you and I, now hear this, don't run. You and I can choose to do well. Do you realize that? That you have a choice of how you want to be and who you want to be. You don't have to be depressed. You don't have to be afraid. You don't have to be in terror. You don't have to be addicted. You can choose not to be. And the minute your intention is not to be, because that's the problem. We say, oh, I don't want to do this. I feel this way. I don't like feeling this way. But actually we do. We like the creds we get for feeling guilty. And we've been talking a lot about guilt in recent days because guilt is a big one. You know, guilt and authority are a big one. Fear is a big one. Those are really big, those three. Authority, guilt, and fear. And you can choose to live without guilt. You can choose to live without fear. And you can choose to live outside of, not underneath of, free of psychological authority. If you're free of psychological authority, you will be free of guilt. If you're free of guilt, you will begin and eventually lose all of your fear, or at least 98% of it. And they are choices. It's a willingness. And the reason I say it's a choice and a willingness is because we get payoffs from our fears and our guilt. I said this earlier in an earlier video, but what guilt does, guilt becomes what we luxuriate in. Guilt becomes what we use to obsess on, to focus on, to itch and scratch and obsess, so that we don't have to do anything about what makes us feel guilty. See that? So, the guy who feels guilty because he's a drunk and passes out on the front lawn, as long as he can obsess about being guilty about that, and then he brings his wife flowers and candy because of what he's done, he doesn't ever have to deal with why he did what he did and how to get rid of it. There goes my neighbor. Yeah, his little bike. Great little bike. And the same with fear. We get a payoff for fear. We get a payoff for submitting ourselves to psychological authority. All those have payoffs. And the problem is that they are all debilitating. They use up so much of our energy, emotional energy, psychic energy, spiritual energy. Obsessing about our guilt and our fear and whether we're under or not under authority, whether we are in authority, who's in authority, what should I be fearing, why do I feel guilty? And our whole life becomes obsessing over symptoms. I'll give you a great example of that. If you watch TV at all, and I don't watch much TV, I watch a lot of internet TV. I watch YouTube and I watch Netflix and all that, but there are so many ads for drugs. Have you noticed that? Get Roxafil, get Norexapap, get this, get that. Always talking about how to deal with symptoms. Never talking about how to deal or what you can do to deal with the cause of the symptoms. That's our pharmaceutical empire. Our pharmaceutical empire is to keep us obsessing over symptoms and keep supplying us ever more products to buy to deal with symptoms. And that's kind of like guilt and fear and authority. We obsess over the symptoms, and by obsessing over the symptoms, we never have to or have the energy or want to or think of or are willing to deal with what causes the guilt, the fear, and the authority issues. And I'm saying that you and I can have a willingness. We can finally have a willingness. I am willing to deal with my guilt and find out what the payoff of my guilt is. I'm willing to deal, I am willing to deal with my fear and discover what the payoff of my fear is. I am willing to deal with why I feel uncomfortable or deal with why I'm under psychological authority and deal what the payoff is of being under psychological authority. Now, when it comes to church, it's really a great church, as you and I know it, church is a great laboratory for dealing with these issues. Because when you go to a local church, you will be, unless it's a, quote, liberal church, and we all know about the liberal churches, unquote. But if it's a Bible-believing, typical evangelical, fundamentalist church, whether it's Calvary Chapel or Baptist or the Vineyard or any of them, Assemblies of God, Foursquare, you will be confronted with the issue of authority and submission to authority. You will be. Because it's very important in church to be submitted to the authority of the pastor and the elders. Completely unbiblical, of course. Completely unbiblical. Nothing to do with the New Testament. And there's a payoff for that. By being under psychological authority, and we do it, I did it, and we do it because then they get to take care of us. Then we don't have to worry about being afraid of death. We don't have to worry about any of our issues, even if we have hidden sins, addictions, whatever, criminal activities, whatever it is, hidden sins. We can not deal with those because our pastor is in authority over me, and he covers me spiritually. He covers, love covers a multitude of sins. So my pastor loves me and I love him, and therefore he covers a multitude of my sins. This is payoff. But the payoff isn't worth it because we remain guilty, we remain deceitful, we remain fearful of being found out, and we remain under authority, and we never take on the commitments and control of our own lives, if I can say it that way. And so church is really good at it. Really good at it. And a lot of ex-church people who know the Lord and are godly and want to follow God, but don't go to church anymore, have a lingering guilt. And instead of dealing with the cause of that guilt, many of us just keep dealing with obsessing over the guilt itself and never discovering why we feel guilty and how to eradicate that guilt. Now, it begins with willingness. It begins with a willingness. It's very courageous, by the way, in my opinion. This is for me anyways. Very courageous to be willing to let your own emotions rise up, whether they be feelings of guilt, feelings of fear, feelings of inferiority feelings of depression, whatever those feelings are, panic, very courageous to be willing to let those feelings, when they happen, just come up. Don't resist them. Don't try to shush them away or, put them down anymore. But be willing to let them come up and just let them be. Don't even try to change them. Just let them be. And when you feel guilty, take a look at your guilt. Just look at it. Let it be. And then begin to look and discern for yourself the payoffs to that guilt. Why do I hold on to guilt? What is the payoff of my guilt? Well, it gives me a feeling that I'm dealing with stuff because I feel guilty, see? Guilt becomes the scapegoat. We deal with guilt. We don't deal with what it is that causes us to feel guilty. But look at it. Just be willing to look at it. Here comes a side-by-side, nice yellow one. Having a good time. Beautiful day this morning. Oh, it's just bright sun, not a cloud in the sky. Beautiful, beautiful winter day in the desert. How you doing? Good to see you. You're on YouTube. Hope it's okay. Well, that's a night. I've never seen a yellow side-by-side. That's really nice. They're having a good time. A lot of good times out here. Very simple good times. I don't need a side-by-side to have a good time. That would cause me more misery than peace, because it's just another vehicle. It's going to break down. It needs gas and oil. It needs to be tuned up. It costs money to maintain. Just so I can run around. I'd rather walk. I'd rather hike. Hiking is free. Walking in the desert is free. And that's the beauty of it. So the payoffs of our guilt. And I don't want anybody to feel guilty or afraid like it's their lot in life. It isn't your lot in life. You weren't born to be guilty and fearful. You know what I mean? And what happens is we get programmed. Programmed by our parents, programmed by teachers, counselors. I'll never forget, I was counseling a counselor in high school. And she was doing these exit counseling sessions for graduating seniors. And every graduating senior would go to one of these counselors, like this woman that I had, to kind of talk about what they were going to do next and, what their plans were. It's supposed to be a help, So this woman, I'll never forget it. She said, well, you're fairly bright. And I was in California. I went to high school in California. I grew up in Santa Monica. I grew up in California on the beach. And I was at Santa Monica High School, where I graduated. And I'll never forget, she said, well, you're bright, but you're not brilliant. And so don't bother. And I was thinking of applying to the University of Redlands because I was a musician. They had a great music department. I was thinking of applying to UC Santa Barbara because they had a great psych department, and I wanted to study psychology and philosophy. And the famous philosopher, now I can't remember his name, but a famous philosopher was teaching there at the time. And she said, you're bright. You're kind of bright, but it's not really brilliant. Hi there. Good morning. Good to see you. So don't even bother applying to University of California or to the University of Redlands or wherever you're thinking of applying, because you're not smart enough to go there. Now, isn't that a wonderful thing for a counselor to say? So she, without meaning to, and I'm not mad at her because she didn't know what she was doing, invested me with fear and even guilt for thinking I was smart enough to go to University of California, Santa Barbara, or the University of Redlands. Guilty for thinking, why do I think I can go there? I can't go there. You see how that programs us? And then you go the rest of your life feeling fearful of being around people that are smarter than you are. Good morning. How you doing? Rest of your life, you're freaked out and bummed out. So you you take those times of arising guilt or fear or whatever it is, despair, anger, and you look at them. See? Don't be afraid. A feeling can't hurt you. Number one, a feeling is passing. It passes. Feelings come and go. Number two, they're not yours. You didn't invite them. You didn't invent them. You don't own them. They happen to everybody. Feelings are part of the human condition. Everybody has feelings. Some are good and some are bad. Or some are fun and some are not fun. So I put it that way. Some are inspiring and elevating. Some are debilitating and dispiriting. So they pass. It's not yours. You know? Remember Jesus said Paul said there's no sin but what is common to man. Everybody has feelings. Everybody has troubles. They're not personal. And by the way, God's not personal either. That's a different one, but get that in your head. And so you don't have to be run by your feelings. Look at them. You know, when you're willing to deal with your feelings, willing to observe them, to let them arise, don't resist them, don't try to change them, don't try to change yourself. Just look at the feeling. Get to know it. What does this feel? What's the payoff of this feeling? Just looking at it will begin to cause it to dissipate like the air coming out of a balloon. It'll just come out. Now you may get thrown around like a balloon does. That can happen, but it'll come out. And you can actually live a much more happy life, a much freer life, and a much more creative life, much more productive life, a much more fulfilling life if you deal with all this nonsense that's put on you and me. Guilt, authority, fears. God, the news. You know, I don't get a newspaper. Nobody gets a newspaper anymore, but I read Drudge occasionally. Maybe every couple of days I'll read Drudge. I read a couple other things. I read Apple News on my phone. And it's nothing but fear. Oh, a new strain of COVID. First case in the U.S. puts doubt on the effectiveness of the vaccines. Oh dear, we've got to be afraid. The news is for fear. The politics of our nation, the politics of the world are based in fear, guilt, and authority. You can be free. Because the kingdom of God isn't out there in that news or in the politics or in the authority of any government or the authority of any psychologically founded authority like counselors, pastors. That's all psychological authority. It's BS. It's not even the real thing. And yet Christians by the millions feel guilty because they're not doing something that somebody, a pastor, somebody told them they should be doing. They're not doing it. It's awful. The kingdom of God is within you. It's not out there. It's in here. In you and in me. Oh, that sun is bright. It's just beautiful. Beautiful today. And I just encourage you, with all the encouragement I can give you, that your potential as being a fulfilled, joy-filled, happy person is unlimited. It is. You're created by a good and loving God who created you and me in his own image. You're okay. And if you feel guilty, look at it. Figure out why. You know, I've said this before, but I'll say it one more time. If you feel guilty, then look at why you feel guilty. And if it's because of something you're doing or saying or the way you're acting or something you did, well, then undo it. Don't do it anymore. Stop doing it. If you don't want a ticket, don't speed. If you don't want to feel guilty, look at the reason you feel guilty. Now, maybe the reason you feel guilty is bogus. There's no reason. You just felt that way, then let go of the guilt. Be willing to let go. Be willing to say, no longer am I going to be guilty for not going to church every Sunday. I'm done. Jesus never told me to go to church every Sunday. God never told me to go to church every Sunday. Nobody but the pastor or my parents or the professional preachers said it's guilt-ridden not to go to church every Sunday. I'm done with it. I'm not guilty. I'm letting it go. You're on your way. Oh, this day. Hey, thanks for being with me. We'll keep talking. It's a wonderful day. A beautiful day in the neighborhood and a neighborly day in the beauty wood. And from the desert, we'll keep at this, keep going until we arrive at the place of enlightened, loving acceptance and forgiveness of ourselves and everybody else. Thanks so much. Have a great day. All the best to you. I'll see you next time.